Hello my love, Tony here from TL Yarn Crafts. The honeycomb stitch changed everything for me. It's the pattern that turned my casual interest in Tunisian crochet into a full-blown obsession. Now trust me, once you see how this stunning stitch comes together, you're gonna be hooked too. Now if you're ready to dive in, hit that like button and subscribe for weekly crochet inspiration, tutorials, and product reviews that'll take your skills to the next level. This video is one of many helpful tutorials to accompany the Tunisian Snowy Sampler, a gorgeous 20-block Afghan that teaches new Tunisian crochet stitches and techniques with every square. To get the row by row instructions for this square and find out how to make the entire sampler blanket, visit the link in the description. First thing we need to do is make our slip knot to start our chain. Insert your hook, and we can start off any even number of stitches. I'm gonna do 14. To make this stitch, we're actually gonna pull up loops in the back bump of our chain. So if we look at the front, we've got these nice little V's here, and these constitute the first 2 loops of a chain, but every chain has 3 loops. So if we rotate this chain towards us, we're gonna expose this back channel of bumps running right down the middle of our chain here. Now we need to find the second chain from the hook. So we've got the loop that's on our hook, and just below that is the first chain. We're gonna find the back bump of the second chain, which is right here. And to do our foundation row, we're gonna take the tip of our hook, shimmy it under the back bump of that second chain, yarn over and pull up a loop. And we're gonna keep that loop on our hook. And we're gonna do that for each chain down the line. So just insert under the bump, yarn over, pull up the loop. If you're having trouble getting into these bumps, it's probably because your chain is too tight, so pull it out and do it again. But we're gonna continue all the way down the chain, and we'll know we did it right if we have the same number of loops on our hook as the number of chains we started with. One more here. There we go. So I started with 14 chains. Let's give this a count and see if we've got the right number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Perfect. So that's the forward pass of our foundation row. Now we'll do the return pass. You'll notice I like to scrunch my loops up towards the top of my hook. Just makes them a little easier to work off. So we're going to yarn over and pull through 1 loop to start that return pass. Then we'll yarn over, pull through 2 loops, 2, 2, and 2 until we have just 1 loop left on our hook. And 1 left. There we go. So this is what your foundation row should look like. Let's move on to row 1 of the pattern. So we've got 2 stitches that we'll be working with, the simple stitch followed by the purl stitch. Now this first loop on our hook always counts as our first stitch. So we're skipping this very first vertical bar, and we're gonna work in the front vertical bar of the next stitch. We're gonna take the tip of our hook, insert it from right to left, just under that very front bar, yarn over and pull up a loop. And make sure you keep your tension soft as you pull up that loop. That loop you just made should be just as high as the previous loop. Now we'll move on to the next stitch, and we need to put a Tunisian purl stitch here. So watch me first, and then we'll do it together. First step, we need to bring the yarn to the front of the hook. So here we start with the yarn in the back. We're bringing it across the front and then to the back again. We're going to insert into the front vertical bar of that next stitch, just like we did for Tunisian simple stitch. And now we need to bring the yarn down and across the front of the stitch we just entered into. And the last step is to yarn over and pull through that 1 loop. That's how we do our Tunisian purl stitch, and we know we did it right if we've got this little horizontal bar sitting in front of our stitch, just like a little purl bump. Okay, I'm gonna drop that loop off, and we're gonna do that purl stitch together. First step, yarn to the front, so coming across the front of the hook, and then bring the yarn to the back. Insert the hook into the next stitch, so just the very front vertical bar of that next stitch. Bring the yarn across the front of the stitch into the back of the work. So just kind of resetting it to where it was. Now that working yarn is laying over the front of the stitch we entered into. Last step is to yarn over and pull through the loop. If you have trouble getting through, I like to use my pinchers here to pull the work away from the hook, rotate the hook towards the work, dip down and scoop through the stitch, just like that. Still pulling up a nice tall loop to keep that even tension. We're gonna alternate those 2 stitches all the way down. So we just did a purl, we're gonna follow that with a simple. Remember that's from the right to the left under the stitch, yarn over and pull up the loop. And that simple is followed by a purl. Yarn to the front, insert, yarn to the back, over and through. Simple one, purl one, yarn to the front, insert, yarn to the back, over and through. Simple, purl. Simple, purl. Simple, purl. And now we're at our very last stitch here. So we're gonna find the 2 loops at the end of this stitch. So here's how to find where to place the last stitch. If we look here at the front of our work, we've got a front vertical bar sitting up loud and proud right in the front, but there's actually 2 bars of this last stitch we need to grab. So we've got this front bar, but if we look behind it, we've got another loop sitting right behind, just about half as high. I like to call that the shadow because it's sitting right behind the front loop. So we need to grab the stitch and the shadow. So I'm going to use the tip of my hook here to dip down and grab that front bar and the shadow right behind it, yarn over and pull up a nice tall loop behind that stitch. So we started with 14 stitches and we'll end with 14 loops on our hook every single time. So that completes our forward pass. Let's move on to the return pass. And the return pass is always done the same way. Yarn over, pull through 1 to start. Make sure you leave a nice tall loop. Then yarn over, pull through 2 and 2 and 2 until you have, again, 1 loop left on the hook. Beautiful. So that's what the first row looks like. Not much yet, but let's put a little bit more fabric on it. So our first row started with a simple stitch followed by a purl, and we're going to alternate our rows. So this time we need to start with a purl stitch followed by a simple. So we've got that loop on our hook already, counting as our first stitch. So we're skipping this very first vertical bar. Our first purl stitch is going to go into this stitch right here. So remember, yarn comes to the front first, insert into the stitch, yarn to the back, over and through, followed by a simple stitch. So what you'll notice is that we're purling our simple stitches and simpling our purl stitches. So if you ever get lost in the row, just know that that's what we're meant to do throughout the pattern. So here we have a simple stitch, so we're going to purl it. And here we have a purl stitch, so we're going to simple it. Purl, simple, purl, ooh, don't split your yarn now, purl, there we go, and simple, purl, and simple, purl, and simple. And now we have our last stitch. If you ever have trouble finding that, I like to kind of pull that last stitch away from the work. So we've got a set of V's here and a set of V's here. We need the bottom set of V's to make sure we're getting into the correct stitch. So not this V, this one right here. So we're grabbing that tall vertical bar, rotating to the back, we've got the shadow right here. Make sure you grab both of those for your last stitch, yarn over and pull through. Yarn over, pull through 1 to start the return pass, and yarn over, pull through 2, 2, and 2 until you have 1 loop left on your hook. Now we've got that honeycomb texture coming through a little bit better. We can see the bottom of some of our honeycombs, and this next row is going to close it up and make sure we can see at least 1 full row of honeycombs. So let's do 1 more row together. So we've got our first loop on our hook. We're skipping this first vertical bar. And if we look here, what stitch is this? This is a purl stitch. We know that because we've got this little purl bump hanging out on the front. A simple stitch will look like this with 2 vertical bars coming out of each other. So since we know this is a purl stitch and our purls are simpled, we're going to simple this stitch. So we start this row with a simple one, followed by a purl one. Simple one, purl one. Simple one, purl one. Simple one, purl one. All the way across the row. And as you get a little bit faster, those purl stitches are really just a flick of the wrist. And we work our edge stitch just like normal. Always we'll have 14 loops on our hook at the end of that forward pass, and then we start the return pass. Yarn over, pull through 1, then yarn over, pull through 2, and 2, and 2. If we take a look at our fabric, we now have an entire closed honeycomb here. So that's what it looks like. I'm gonna add a few more rows onto my swatch and then join me back here and I'll show you how we'll bind off. I added a bit more fabric to my swatch and I think it is just so pretty. All the little honeycombs, they just, oh my gosh, they just make me smile. I'm obsessed with this stitch, it's so good. So now we're going to bind off. Now, typically with Tunisian crochet, you're recommended to just slip stitch across the top. The problem is if you slip stitch across the top, it's going to look like you just did Tunisian simple stitch at the top, but we're going to do what's called binding off in pattern, which essentially means we're still gonna insert our hook as we would continuing with the honeycomb pattern, but instead of pulling up a loop and doing the normal forward pass, we're going to slip those loops to bind off the stitches. So here's how that's gonna go. First loop on the hook, as always, counts as the first stitch, so we're skipping this very first vertical bar. We'll find the next vertical bar. You can see the little purl bump in front of it. That means this is a purl stitch. So we would normally insert under that stitch, yarn over, and pull through just this loop for the forward pass. But instead, we're gonna pull through both of these loops, and we're just gonna do it loosely to slip stitch through. So the next stitch is a simple stitch, so we would purl it. So we're still gonna insert as if to purl, but when I yarn over, I'm gonna pull through both of these loops. Just like that. Well, not exactly like that, but like that, okay? So next stitch is a purl, so we're gonna slip it as for simple, and then we're gonna slip the next as for purl. Slip the next one as for simple, and the next one as for purl. So we'll do that all the way across the row until we get to the last stitch. And now we're at the very last stitch right here. So we'll still want to insert that like we would for our very last stitch on a forward pass row. But now we're going to yarn over, pull through the stitch and the remaining loop on your hook. We can pull that loop up and out. And at this point we can fasten off. And just like that, we have completed the honeycomb stitch. Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. It's great, I love it.